What celebrity's death did not take you by surprise? Elvis. In the year before his death, he went from looking rough to looking like death. He never lost his voice. I think it got stronger towards the end. It could have been the weight gain. Weight has a big effect on the voice. The singer of Blues Traveler lost a ton of weight and it changed his voice a lot. That's true, he sounded good until the end. That video of him doing Unchained Melody in '77 is too much. Watched it once, never again, but he could sing right up until the end. His daughter who recently died. I wasn't surprised at all. Her 21-year-old son, doppelganger of Elvis, committed suicide and every year she just looked worse. I remember years ago, I saw her perform on the Oprah Winfrey Show. A song called, "Kick Them When They Are Up, Kick Them When They Are Down." It was painful to watch. Even Oprah didn't know how to react and everyone got second-hand embarrassment. I knew since then that this lady will have a tough life. Choosing a career in music when you are daughter of Elvis is like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. Twice. Amy Winehouse. Yep. The first time I heard Rehab, I thought, this won't end well for her. The song didn't get me. Lots of artists sing edgy stuff about how they're gonna do what they want to do, damn the consequences. But seeing her deteriorate year after year once she got famous, you knew she wasn't long for this world. The last photos I saw of her alive, she damn near looked dead already. Actually, Amy looked much healthier in the 2 or so years leading up to her death. Not many people know this, but she was completely clean from drugs for 3 years before she died. And only drinking heavily every few weeks. Unfortunately, her body just gave up during one of these drinking benders because of years of bulimia. Her heart just couldn't take it anymore. Otherwise, she was working so hard to overcome her alcoholism like she had her drug use and was working hard on a new album. Us fans that followed her life closely were actually quite surprised to hear of her passing because she was doing so well. She was so close. It still saddens me to this day. She truly was a once-in-a-lifetime talent, but like they say, she was too real for this world, or maybe this world was too cruel for somebody so beautiful and so fragile. People really don't comprehend the damage that eating disorders do to your body. I lost a friend at 30 because she couldn't overcome it and had a heart attack. She drank fairly regularly, to self-medicate the depression and everything else she had going on, but never used any hard drugs. Alcohol does a lot more damage when you're an adult that weighs less than 90 pounds. She'd been to several clinics, therapists, treatment programs, etc., but even when she'd put weight back on and start to do well, we'd see her start to slide back into it, no matter how hard we all tried to support her. It's so hard when there's nothing you can do or say to help someone and you just watch them deteriorate. It blows my mind that people still don't put alcohol in the same category as hard drugs. I agree, I wasn't downplaying how devastating alcoholism is by any means. I just wanted to correct the misconception that Amy died as a result of her heroin and crack addictions. A lot of people still think she was using when she died. I think it's important people know just how hard she worked to get clean and stay clean and just how close she was to overcoming her alcoholism too. She deserves that at least. Aaron Carter, sadly. I'd seen a show of his about 5 years prior to his death, and it was clear even then he needed major help. He seemed only half conscious, kept yelling random proclamations at the show, tried to play the keyboard tattoo on his arm like it was a real piano, and more. Then I saw an interview he gave about 3 years after that and, somehow, he was much worse. It was clear this guy needed a major intervention if his life was going to get on track and continue. A real shame. There was something wrong with the parents of that family. His sister OD'd a few years before he did, and she has a failed career as a pop star. There was a very revealing article that I read around the time of Aaron's death about just how awful and exploitative the filming of Leslie Carter's music video was. Along with his drug problems, he said that in the years leading up to his death the amount of abuse on social media was unbearable, receiving direct messages every day to kill himself etc. He would often reply back to these scumbags, but you can imagine this only made him turn in on himself even more. I never really liked Aaron Carter when he first started making waves, but on a human level it is never nice to see anyone go through addiction and bullying on the level he seemingly endured. I honestly forgot he passed. Shame. His mom was a bit strange, how she released the photos of the bathtub and bathroom he died in for the public. Had to exploit him even in death. As far as celebrity misfortune goes, he's one of the ones I feel most sorry for. He seemed like a genuinely sweet person who just never had a chance. Even at the peak of his career he was treated as nothing more than a sideshow, a gimmick to capitalize on his older, more famous brother's success with Backstreet. The last time I saw him was on Lance Bass's documentary about Lou Pearlman, and not only did he look ill, he was almost in tears defending this man who unequivocally took advantage of him, at the very least financially, all because this guy had once shown him superficial kindness. He seemed so utterly in denial and so damaged, it was heartbreaking to watch even for someone who didn't know or care about him. Can I also do the reverse and say I'm surprised Ozzy is still with us? What is this dude's secret? Sometimes I feel he has spent his whole career slowly pickling himself and now he's at the point he can no longer spoil. I'm pretty sure he literally has a genetic mutation that gives him an extremely high tolerance to drugs and alcohol. If the follow-up to his autobiography is any indicator, he actually does. Dude is genetically wired to survive the hard partying lifestyle and he still managed to almost die several times over. Same with everyone from the Rolling Stones. Dudes are in their 70s still rocking out on stage. Mick Jagger is 80. Keith Richards 79. The fact of half of a band being alive around age 80 is not really so remarkable. Most astonishing is that they've been consistently touring and putting out records for most of the last 60 years. There are lots of old bands where you see a geezer tour, with one or two originals putting an act together after decades of inactivity. The Stones have basically done a tour every 12 to 18 months since 1963, minus a 7-year gap in the late 80s. Ryan Dunn. I'm honestly shocked that other Jackass stars have survived this long. Outside of Bam, most of them have cleaned up their lives. Steve-O could easily have been on this list, but he genuinely seems happy and healthy. Steve-O legitimately 180-foot D. I imagine he still has some form of demons, everyone does, but every time I saw him in the last few years he was so far from what he was before. I follow him pretty closely. Pretty sure he just struggles with depression that he manages well with medication. Watching Steve-O prosper is one of the most rewarding things to see. It just genuinely warms my mother trucking heart to see how happy and healthy he is. The Beast stunt in the latest Jackass film was amazing. He looked like a man half his age. So happy to see him doing well. I just wish Bam could clean himself up. I don't want him to join Ryan Dunn. But, the way he's acting I think he wants to. Yep. Even his mom April says he hasn't been the same since Ryan died. I honestly think Bam is passively suicidal. I was shocked and saddened by Sinead O'Connor, but also not surprised as I knew she had always struggled with her mental health and I knew from recent reports around the time of her death, she was in a pretty bad spot. Prince also sadly didn't surprise me. While I'm a huge Prince fan and I wanted to see him perform someday, I knew that when he OD'd the first time there's always a high chance it will happen again in a short time. Knowing he was a very private man who didn't want people around a lot of times. I was not surprised when I heard there was a death at his house. I frankly knew immediately and I just wish his people stayed with him, especially since he was going to get help with some addictions he had which led to the OD. Sinead O'Connor didn't surprise me at all. She was suffering for many years and with the passing of her son just over a year ago it must have all gotten too much for her. John Candy and Chris Farley. Edit, and Ralphie May, thank you. Add Ralphie May to that list. Someone once said about him, you get to have one vice, not three. Booze, food, or drugs. Pick one, not all. I will skip the sushi in Youngstown. Thanks Ralphie for this tip. In fact, probably just better to skip Youngstown altogether. Red light fever. Once you are on stage, the world just falls away and you are your best self. Unfortunately, that light has to go off at some point. And that's when the world comes rushing back. Indeed. Gabriel Iglesias was the same way. He'd show up to a venue looking like The Walking Dead, but as soon as he was announced it would all melt away and he'd be his happy-go-lucky self on stage for 2 hours. As soon as he was backstage after the show, though, oof. I'm glad he started taking better care of himself. Tom Petty. Saw him at a music festival, and while he was performing I leaned over to my wife and said, he looks like he could die at any moment. A couple months later he died. I saw him in Nashville in spring of 2017 before he died and he looked rough then. I told my husband I'm glad we went, as it was a sold-out show and we weren't planning on going. We got free tickets from a client of mine on main floor 3 rows back that couldn't go. I thought he looked half dead then. I was a bit pissed when I heard that he died from substance abuse. Didn't need to happen. People think they can manage their drug abuse until they can't. Hello, Taylor Hawkins as well. But I saw a documentary on Petty a bit back and learned that he was touring and performing on a broken hip and was in constant pain on stage. Hence the drug use. Made it a bit more understandable, but still. Michael Jackson dude had been literally falling apart for years. I remember his death, but I was a kid and didn't really get it. Yeah, I say this all the time. Tragic? Definitely. But not really shocking. You're already dead if you need propofol to sleep. So I moved to Europe, and that summer before I left, we were all hanging out and a guy I didn't like that much burst in that afternoon. Michael Jackson died. It shouldn't have been surprising, but at least a guy I didn't like told me, the news before I left for good. I was in basic training the day he died. All training shut down for the day. Only other time I heard about that happening was 9/11. Lemmy. He was notorious for promiscuity, drug use, including alcohol and tobacco, and poor diet. He admitted that his vices were bad for his health, and he did advise people not to follow his example as he saw many of his contemporaries die due to said vices. Dude made it to 70. That is like 190 in Lemmy years. Apparently he replaced alcohol with blueberries at one point and gave himself blueberry poisoning. Lemmy! You're not supposed to let them ferment before you eat them. Doc said he needed to drink more water, so he started putting ice cubes in his Jack. I remember seeing Dave Grohl talk about Lemmy. Dave had one of his kids with him backstage when the kid was little. Lemmy walked into Dave's dressing room and saw the kid and immediately turned around to put his cigarette out and set his drink down outside before coming in. He knew that his vices were vices and took care to be respectful of others. Steve Irwin. Was bound to happen sooner or later, as he kept playing with critters most people would avoid as they're dangerous and possibly deadly. With just one bite, this little beauty can kill me. I'm gonna play with its balls. LOL. Then he got accidentally stabbed in the heart by a manta, essentially the cocker spaniel of the ocean. Like WTF? But wouldn't it have been sad to have seen him slowly fade away from something like cancer? If someone lives their life seeking dangerous situations, I feel it is better to die doing so and be remembered for it. Please like and subscribe for more daily content.